of the Word. He was really good, really good at being a dad to a child because he was very protective, he was really good about teaching, and he was really good at providing, okay? But the problem came as I began to move into my teenage years and I was wanting to try on the freedoms and responsibilities of adulthood. He really had a hard time with watching his little boy, well, I was the last in a long line of two. I was growing up. He really had a hard time with that, and he really wanted to, and hopefully he will never watch this on camera, but even now, he wants to still parent a 5-year-old boy that he still sees when he looks at me. And so as I made my way into the teenage years, and I'm wanting to try on all the freedom and responsibilities of adulthood, I was extremely frustrated with the man who is still treating me as a 5-year-old. And so one morning I am getting ready for school. I am out of the shower. I am standing at the sink. It may have been that one day of the month that I had to shave, but I remember standing in front of a foggy glass, and I hear on the other side of the door, so frustrated because it was just every day it was something. He said, "Mitchell, I have some apples out here. Do you want me to leave you an apple?" I'm on the other side of a closed door. And I remember yelling through this wooden pane door, Why would I want an apple? That's terrible. Just terrible. Just a teenager at the end of his rope wanting to be treated like an adult, and a dad wanting so much just to give his son an apple. And I can imagine thinking that, what is the matter with this child that he's yelling at me over an apple? I was the most dishonoring, most disrespectful teenager that you could ever imagine. Just a jerk. Just a jerk to my dad. So fast forward 15 years later or so, I'm married now. There's a child at the table in Chick-fil-A in Snellville, Georgia, and I'm having lunch with my mom and my dad, and I'm thinking through, now that I was a dad, I'm thinking through just how awful I was to my dad. And I looked at him in Chick-fil-A and I said, "How did you put up with me? What kept you?" I said, "I was so awful to you. I was so mean. I said so many mean things to you. Why didn't you beat me up? Why didn't you kick me out of the house? How did you even tolerate me?" And tears swelled up in his eyes, and he looked at me and he said, "I forgive you all of that." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I was a teenager." I said, "Oh, okay." So, I'm bracing. I'm bracing for that. It's coming. It's like 2 years away. He's not even listening. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's going to be great. It's going to be, this sermon is going to make a world of difference, I can already tell. We're here in Exodus 20. Exodus 19 through 24 of the book of Exodus comprise the covenant. We've said this week after week. The 10 Commandments that we have here in chapter 20 are, we could call them the terms and conditions of the covenant. That if Israel will do these things, they will be, as he says in chapter 19 and verse 5 and 6, "You will be my treasured possession among all the peoples of the earth." And so what this means to be God's treasured possession is essentially this, that God's people will model what it looks like to have a well-ordered life. that with all of the pagan nations that are going to surround the promised land, Israel is going to model and exemplify what it means to have a well-ordered life, to worship the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That is, they are going to have a life that reflects the original intent that God had for mankind on the day that He created them, if they will keep this covenant. And so, in the first 4 commandments, they will model what it is like to love the Lord your God. In the last 6, they will model what it is like to love your neighbor as yourself. They will show to an unbelieving world what it means to be God's children. They will, in every sense of the word, be the light of the world if they keep the commandments, okay? Are y'all with me? So we come now to the 5th commandment. Honor your father and mother. I'll read it one more time, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. So God's will for humanity and what humanity should look like begins at home. Okay? So if these last 6 tell us how to love our neighbor as ourselves, that love begins in the home with honoring your father and your mother. Do you see that? The word honor here means to give weight to. It is the same Hebrew word that is translated as glory. And that means that by the way that they think, by the words that they use, and by their actions, they are to respect and even revere their fathers and their mothers. So that when we get to Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 3, it's actually going to use that word, revere your mother and your father. That's how children are to look at their parents, that their role in life is honoring and revering these people. So the man and the woman, we know there, because here we have honor father and mother. Leviticus 19 and 3, it's mother and then father. We're seeing something develop. That the man and the woman are equally created in the image of God. So that's first. They are equal in that they are both created in the image of God. They are distinct in that God has created them male and female. Men and women are different, right? And when joined together in marriage, they give us every notion of how God relates to His church. So the very first view, the very first ideas that we have about who God is going to come in this marriage relationship between the people that we know as mom and dad. This is how Paul says it in the book of Ephesians. He says, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Paul's quoting Genesis 2 here. And then he says this mystery is profound. And I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So this mystery of a man leaving father and mother and cleaving to his wife and becoming their own family with a husband and wife created in the image of God, male and female, husband leading, wife following, this is supposed to teach us something about who God is. So let me give us here 3 reasons from Scripture. 3 reasons we are to honor our father and our mother. 3 reasons. And the first one is this: we honor them as those who gave us life. We honor our father and mother because they are the ones who gave us life. Now, we're not really thinking like Bill Cosby here. I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. We're thinking about the role that they played in creation. That is, in the beginning, God took the dust of the earth, He crafted man into His own image, then breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. and made him male. And then he said, it's not good that that man should be alone. He took one of his ribs and created a woman and brought them together with this instruction, be fruitful and multiply. So part of what it means to be created in the image of God is to be reproducing, to be fruitful, and to multiply. So Psalm 139:13 says, "For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb." That this is God's plan. This is God's design. For them to give you life. And they gave you life. And so you may be like Job. You may be like the prophet Jeremiah, who both of these men at one certain season in their life, they said, I wish I had never been born. I don't think either one of them would say yes to that now. I don't think that would be a good sampling of their entire life. But at the end of the day, we have to say that it is better to be here than not to be here. It is better to exist than not exist. And so we have our existence to some measure, we should thank our father and mother. Okay? Whether you look at mom and dad and say they did a great job or they did a horrible job, at least they did the job. They got you here. And so we need to recognize the role they played as God's instruments. While we may not have picked them out, God did. God did. So we honor them as those who gave us life. The second thing that we do is we honor them as our teachers. We honor them as our teachers. We not only recognize them as those through whom God has given us life, but we recognize them as our first and our primary teachers in life. That is parent. They are your first teacher, and they will and always will remain your primary teacher. Should. They are the ones who teach us how to live. They teach us how to eat with a fork and a spoon, so that the rest of our life we're not just grabbing it up with our hands and shoving it in our mouth. They are the ones who teach us how to walk. They are the ones who teach us to use the bathroom. And by that, I mean literally the bathroom, that place, that toilet. Well, we'll go no matter what. But it won't be pretty once you get older. They are the ones who take the time and the patience to teach us how to use the bathroom and how to button our pants when we're done and tying our shoes. And 1,000 other things. They teach us how to live. They teach us how to shake hands, how to answer a phone, how to finish a job, and on it goes. And that matters because you will one day need to obey a teacher in school, a professor in college, your boss, your supervisor at work. You will need to learn to obey them. So learning to obey is something that begins at home, and it's something that we're going to need for the rest of our life. That if we're going to live long in the land, if we're going to prosper, if we're going to hold down a job, we had better learn to obey at home. And so one way that we honor father and mother is by obeying them and learning how to obey father and mother. We'll get to the rest of that in just a second. But it is most important. The thing that we have to see here that is most important is not learning to obey them for the sake of a job, though that is important. We have to learn that if we never learn to obey father and mother, we will never learn to obey God. Okay, so what I mean by that is this. Mom and dad are going to ask you some things. going to ask you to clean up your room. They're going to ask you to get a bath. They're going to ask you to come home on time for curfew. They're going to ask you to do some dishes, do some laundry to keep up your end of the chores. Here's what mom and dad will never do. They will never say to you, as God said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your fathers and house to the land that I will show you." That is, God is going to ask more of you, and God is going to require more of you than mom and dad ever will. And so if you don't learn to obey mom and dad, there's a very small chance. Only by grace will you ever learn to obey God. Here's Jesus' call on all of us, on every one of us, me and you. Jesus says, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? The Son of Man is coming with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done." As mom and dad may ask you to get a certain grade on your report card, and they may tell you that you have to wear these clothes when you go out in public, but God is going to say, "Take up a cross and follow me. Lay down your life for my sake." So if we can't obey mom and dad in small things and small earthly things, how are we going to obey God when he asks the big things? So kids, learn to obey your mom and your dad. You need to. Your mom and dad always get it right? No. They are sinners just like you. They do things wrong, and hopefully, your parents will confess their sins to you. Parents, you need to. They are flawed. They are going to make huge mistakes. They are going to ask you things that they probably shouldn't ask you. Learn to obey them anyway. Kids, are y'all listening to me? Oh, Landry's kids? Especially? Crayons, good. Simply put, if we never learn to obey our parents, we have little chance of ever learning to obey God. He will ask us far more than our parents ever will. And that means also learning to obey and to honor our parents in our teenage years.